All right.
All right.
I'm good to go.
Same.
Let's go.
All right. I guess hello everyone back to effect time number 3. Yes.
No, it's 4.
Is it 4 already?
Yeah, wow. It's 4 already. Yeah.
That's crazy. Yeah, but time flies. And effect is coming along nicely. So really curious to see what we're diving into today. We have a new face on the show as a guest today, Max, joining in from New York, Manhattan. And Max has been working on an exciting new addition to the Effect.js ecosystem, which is a port from the Zio ecosystem, which ports over a little CLI framework. So really excited to dive into that today. But first of all, welcome, Max.
Thank you very much. I'm very excited to show off the effect port of zio-cli and see what bugs we encounter and features we decide we want to include, and just kind of talk about some of the things that I'm envisioning for the library for the future. So I'm excited to hear your guys' opinions.
That's awesome. Yeah, I had the pleasure or the trouble of like building many CLIs in the past, and never quite felt right to build one with Node, and in particular with TypeScript. There's either you do everything by yourself and like starting from like processing of the process args array, etc., or use like some library to like full-blown framework, and they're all either abandoned or the abstraction feels too lightweight or too heavyweight, etc. And yeah, this what zio-cli has created, and now what you've ported over to Effect seems really, really promising. So I'm very eager to look into that. And as an excuse to actually starting to look into that, we thought we'd take another step at the code base we looked at like roughly a month ago with Contentlayer. And Contentlayer has a CLI component. So this is where we thought, okay, we've seen that a bit the last time. And given that the CLI component itself is an entry point into Effect, but it could be even widened and could be even more effective. Maybe that's not a pun we continue to make. We thought that might be a good testing bed for giving Effect CLI a try. So how about I share my screen? We open the Contentlayer code base, and then Max and I gonna parent that, and hopefully not too much get stuck where Michael has to help us get unstuck. But let's see, how does that sound?
And maybe we could go through like some of the, maybe you could give us like an overview of like the CLI again, just to like refresh people's memory on the Contentlayer CLI.
Let's start there. So I can share my screen now. Can you see it?
Yes.
All right, great. So this is the Contentlayer code base. Just did a fresh copy. So this is also public here, so everyone can check it out on GitHub. Contentlayer dev Contentlayer. That's the code base. We're working off the main branch here, and yeah, I'm just gonna open it here in VS Code. So maybe before looking at the actual code, let's take a quick look at as an example what it feels like to currently use the CLI, and that we get like pretty minimal functionality in terms of surface area, but just that we remind ourselves what does that look like. So I'm just gonna cd into an example directory here. Examples, let's go into the MDX one. And then in here, I have that as a dependency. Contentlayer, the dependency here is both a library and also a CLI. So we can just use it here, yarn content layer. And then, yeah, let's see what happens. We run it here. All right. So we got this. So it is like a little helper, little help function here.
Johannes, can you raise a little bit the font? Because it seems from YouTube, they say it's a little bit too small.
All right. Let's do this one bigger. All right. I hope that that's better, but it's already like I'm already running a little bit short on space here. So maybe you can just maybe the resolution on YouTube is not high enough, and you'd have to like wait for the recording. But that's probably I think that's like as high as I can go. Yeah. So
the terminal is a little bit bigger than the code above. So maybe when later on you share the code, raise the font a little bit on the code size too.
All right. Yeah. Let's see how that goes. So the CLI right now has like two main commands, build and dev. It has a third command that's not visible, but that's like content layer post install, which we can look into in a second. And we can run the build command. And yeah, that generates the node modules, and then it's done. There's actually a little delay. I'm not quite sure what that is about. I think there was like some problem with like an older OpenTelemetry version, but that should be separate, and we can just disregard it for the sake here. Yeah, so that's from a usage, and there's also the long running dev mode of content layer, which watches for changes. So if I were to go in here, say hello world 2, this watches for the file change and then runs again. So let's undo this. And every CLI also has a help command. And all of this right now that I get like these nice help messages, etc., is based on a little helper framework or library called Clippanion. Clippanion is by Mael, also the person who is behind Yarn 2, Yarn 3, etc. Really great engineer working at Datadog. And yeah, so this is, I guess, also was created as a part of Yarn, since I guess Yarn uses this itself. And this was so far the best CLI library I could find that has TypeScript, TypeScript support, etc. But let's see how we can improve things from here on with Effect CLI. So yeah, that's so much for the usage. And now let's look into how that's actually implemented. So we've seen here, as the dependencies go, we just have content layer as dependency here. So let's look here. This is a monorepo. You might remember this from last time. This content layer package here doesn't really contain a lot of source code itself. It's basically just redirects to the individual building blocks, which are here. So this is where we'll like dive into right away. But just to show you how this is wired up here, on the package.json, we wire up the bin, which points here to bin CLI CJS. And in here, we're just delegating to content layer CLI, importing a run function here, which returns a promise, and then we execute it. And some minor error handling, which we hopefully never have to rely on, but it's here anyway, in case something goes horribly wrong. So let's look into content layer CLI. So now we're in this package, and this is also where we'll spend the most of the time for today's session. So let's take a look. This package here is not a CLI really in itself, because it doesn't expose a binary, but it just exposes some like an entry point here, which is this one, which is exposing this run function. And this is currently, this is just the way how Clippanion is typically being used. So this is very, very similar to, I guess I don't see like a full entry point here, but this is basically just based on what Clippanion is doing. And I guess we would rip out a bunch of that stuff and replace it with Effect.ts CLI. And yeah, so we can take a quick look into the individual commands. The default command here is just printing the CLI usage. Then we have the build command, which runs the build. This is, I think, as far as we've seen it the last time, where execute save here. This is where we've already, where we can already run an effect. Yeah, then we have the dev command. And yeah, that should probably be enough for today. So Max, do you think this gives you a good idea of like the current structure and the entry points?
Yeah, I think this is it's a good starting point. And I often find when I've been using my own port myself, I think it's been the easiest thing to think about your CLI from the perspective of usage, like the actual help text of your CLI app, and then work backwards from there to actually convert it over to Effect CLI, because it oftentimes it seems like when I've been working with it with my own projects, it actually decreases a lot of the code that I actually have to write anyways. So it may be helpful to work backwards from like the actual usage of the CLI you built here.
That's awesome. Yeah. Where do you suggest we start? Should we start with like the printing of just like the usage? This?
Yeah. Let's just take a look.
All right, great. I guess the very first thing here to do is like install Effect CLI as a dependency.
Yes. I can send you the install line if you want, or you can go to the repo.
Let's start here. So, okay.
Bug fixing even as early as this morning.
Yeah, you've been busy, like almost 100 commits. All right. So I guess we need these two additional dependencies.
Yeah, printer is another port that I worked on a while ago, which I use internally in Effect.ts CLI to render the actual help documentation. The port is not obviously a one-to-one from zio-cli to Effect.ts CLI. It's not because we have this printing framework built for Effect.ts CLI. I thought it would be a good opportunity to use it within the library.
Yeah, I've in fact also looked into that in the past. And had some idea, or like had some wishes how things could be even improved in terms of pretty printing and colorization, etc. So
and by the way, the port of printer is also a port from a very good piece of tech. It's a pretty printing library that comes from Haskell. It's quite flexible in what it can do.
That's awesome. Yeah, I'm also curious to learn more about that, but I guess that's for another time, or if we have enough time later. So just installed it, and for the audience watching, the versions of Effect and Effect Core, which is sort of the foundation for everything. Be sure that if you want to try this out as well, that you're on 0.48. That you're in 0.48, as earlier versions might not be compatible with this. But yeah, so just as a heads up. So I have installed this. So should I take a look at an example to kind of like familiarize myself with this?
The Git example might be a good one for you to take a look at because it's got subcommands incorporated.
All right.
In it, so it might just be a good place to start.
Okay. Do you suggest for our code base here to just like create a new file where at least maybe we don't run it yet, but just we make it happy from like a types perspective, and then this way we don't have to yet throw away the other thing? And
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
yep. All right. So let's create a new file, index effects. Oops. And we're gonna change this later. And here I'll just delete everything. So where would we start? So I'll just like scroll through this and try to build a bit of an intuition for it. So you've already like structured.
Maybe it would be
things.
a good idea for Max to give a slide overview of the primitives, how a command is set it up in the library, also for the viewers, instead of just going straight into a discovery of the example, just the same way you did with the content layer side.
Yeah. Do you have a like some material somewhere that would explain the concepts, or maybe you want to share the screen and like explain this, give a quick
Maybe
primer.
talking through this example.
Yeah, I was going to say we could actually use the example as maybe a good way to kind of talk about the primitives that are exposed through the library, because some of these examples are slightly more feature rich, some of them are less feature rich. But we can start with this one, and if we want to take a look at the others, we could do that as well.
That's great.
The top portion of this example, the section that I've called model and constructors, is really just setting up a very simple DSL for the subcommands themselves. But the real meat of the library starts where we're adding the subcommands here.
All right.
So every command or subcommand is built using the command model from the from the CLI library. And you can actually see the construction of the command down below. It's kind of the last one there where I'm saying, add command equals the pipe, right under add subcommand right there. The last stanza there. So when you construct a command, you have the ability to provide it with options that it can take, arguments that it can take, and help text, as well as there's a bunch of different combinators as well. But it really all starts with kind of thinking about your commands for your application. And then once you've determined like what commands you want to expose in your CLI, you can build up the command by adding options and arguments. So you can see in this case, it's not obviously not the entire Git CLI library, right? That would be a massive.
I already figured like almost a bit more than 100 lines of code. So
a very simple example, and actually these examples also come from zio-cli. Nice. So they're a port of the examples from zio-cli. But under the add subcommand, the first thing we are actually doing is constructing an option. So if you scroll up just a little bit, Johannes, I'm sorry. The options come in a variety of different flavors, and there's a bunch of different constructors and combinators to do different things with. I'm not going to go into all of them. We can just go through the examples for now, because documentation is another thing on my list of things to do. But
very consistent with the rest of the effect ecosystem.
I was about to say that.
It's okay. It's okay. The zio-cli library didn't have a ton of documentation either yet, because it's also a little bit young. So I'm just trying to keep up with their features for now.
My least favorite advice from Mike there is always like, yeah, read the code, read the source code. But I hope we're behind this chapter at some point in the next couple of months.
I think the nice thing about the CLI library is hopefully it's relatively discoverable. So using autocomplete, you can kind of see the different things you can do with it. But in this example, I'm basically creating a Boolean flag. So the first argument to Boolean is the name. And if you provide it with a single character name, it by default converts that into a short option on the command line, so a single dash. And if you provide it a multi-character name, it converts it into a long option on the command line. So it's a double dash name. So we're passing the modified flag into the command. We're also saying that this command takes arguments as well. And in this case, the arguments is a named directory. So this is one interesting limitation of that I came across when trying to port zio-cli. So they make use of overloads quite extensively, where if you can either create a directory that isn't a named directory, or you can create a directory that you give it a name. So there's different combinators to take and constructors to take care of all those cases in effect CLI. And then in giving it some help text as well. So we pass all those things into the command, and that's our first command. We do the same exact thing to create other commands down below. So add subcommand, the remote subcommand, and then I actually construct the parent get command.
Right. Yeah.
Once you've figured out all of the different commands you want to create, subcommands, things like that, you can actually pass them into the CLI app constructor, which has a bunch of different arguments that it takes. And again, to enhance discoverability, I chose to make it take an object as an argument instead of just like different arguments.
Yeah.
So you actually get autocomplete to figure out what goes in each thing. And so at this point, you've actually not done anything with your app yet. You haven't run it, right?
Right. Yeah.
And I think that's kind of the nice thing about the effect TS CLI is you can build up the application itself without actually doing anything with it. And then when you actually want to run it, you can choose to do so.
What's so interesting about this though is like when I first heard there's like someone like saying, hey, this is like a great property. If you haven't experienced that yet, for me this didn't mean much. It's like, okay, yeah, like some esoteric property that doesn't really give me much, but it really unlocks a whole bunch of things and helps so much with composability, etc. So for whoever's listening and feels like, okay, yeah, whatever that means, that's not important for me, just go ahead and at some point this will click for you. Yeah.
I think a good example is
Currently enables anything that is higher order. So think of it like in terms of a simple promise. If I give you an already constructed promise and you have a failure, can you, for example, retry the same promise? No, you can't, because it's something that already happened. It's no longer a description of an operation. Anytime you have a description, you gain the possibility of adding behavior after, and transforming behavior is the core essence of FP.
Right. Well, it's that makes total sense, but it makes more sense for me now where I've been in situations where I actually had that case. Otherwise, it sounds like a lot of theoretical cool stuff. But
one example that you might gain in this precise example is the ability to generate an auto-completion script that starts from the simple description of the application. So you gain multiple possibilities of interpretation of the same.
Exactly. Yeah, I think we can later in today's session go a bit into maybe a potential roadmap or upcoming features for Effect CLI. Since exactly that we have a semantic description now of information, Max can release new features, and suddenly your CLI that you've built gets superpowers. But we're digressing a bit. Let's get back into the example. And so I think we are basically through it, or almost through it. We have the CLI app now, which I guess at that point we just need to run.
Yeah, and I think just to point out one additional thing, Johannes, on the point that you made, where when you actually build a description of a program as opposed to building a program, you kind of gain the ability to transform that program without actually executing it without actually executing at the time. So a really great example of that is you can actually take your CLI app, and before you run it, you can actually transform it. So you can look at, injecting additional help text or adding a footer to your CLI app, or transforming it really however you want. And you can do the exact same thing with the commands themselves. So you can see I'm mapping each of the sub commands above to a DSL that I created, and then using that DSL to, when I run the program, to figure out what I want to do based on the arguments that were passed in. So for example,
okay,
I'm matching.
So this basically means here we're basically just creating sort of like a almost like interfaces, just the structural interfaces, but not yet the implementation. And so just the shell, the structural shell. And here this wouldn't even, like here we're not yet in a IDE-ish environment, so we don't have like type safety here. We could actually open this in Gitbot so we get it. But this would probably complain about like, hey, you don't have given me the implementation for this.
And yeah, that's exactly right. If you don't give it the implementation for your commands, it won't know what to do, right? And you can actually open this in Gitpod if you want to. I think I set that up correctly, maybe.
Yeah, let's actually do that.
All aligning on usage. It's a fantastic piece of tech.
Let's actually do that. Gitpod.
And the other thing that's kind of interesting about the commands in the CLI app, which I kind of alluded to, is the different combinators you get access to, since you're only describing your program at the time. So you can transform commands and your actual CLI application without actually running it before you run it, based on other things that are happening in your application. So, but I agree with Johannes. It doesn't really feel like you have superpowers until you've used it and done it with some FP framework, and then you really just never want to go back to using non-FP.
I think this is like a bit of like a curse of the entire like functional program. I see it almost like as a bit of my objective here as well, is like to make it as least academic as possible, and just to present like little like this, like show off all of the superpowers that you get without like explaining yet how this like theoretically works under the hood, and like draw people in for that. Hold on. So
I think it's a shared effort that also the Zio community has. And in fact, during the last 2-3 years, we've all been able to make FP way more approachable, even without having any of the academic background that would be required.
I kind of go like, for myself, like when I'm talking to people, I find myself going even further by not framing it as or upfront not framing it as like, hey, let me tell you about functional programming. I like tell them rather about, hey, like similar to how React has just given us like really powerful abstractions for a specific domain, which is like front end views. We don't really have like similar powerful abstractions in a more general domain. And I want to motivate like, hey, here's some problems that you typically have, and then what could some of these abstractions and primitives look like? And then I show them some of these, and later on I say, hey, this happens to be pretty similar to functional programming. Anyway, we can talk about that another time, but we have it here set up now. So I guess when I would simply remove this probably because it needs multiple arguments, but I get the separation here. That makes total sense.
And really all that's happening there is when you run a CLI application, you're providing it with the arguments, which again, I give the flexibility to this the same way that zio-cli does. We give the flexibility of passing in whatever arguments you want, right? So you can pass it in from argv, you can pass it in as an array of arguments, whatever you really want. But that first parameter to CLI app.run, which is passing it right in the example I'm using process.argv, but you can pass in the arguments however you want.
Yeah, we could have this in a test setup and just pass in something else. Yeah, this makes total sense. I think for some people, like compared to what we have with Clippanion, or what is the thing that Heroku built, I think Oak Cliff, people might think, oh, there's like a lot of boilerplate. but this is like all like pretty straightforward, and I think there's like much less magic and just like much more structural composable pieces. So this makes a lot of sense. I'm kind of keen to know, like,
Is there any way, is there any way to like provide implementation of commands in a partial manner?
Elaborate, Michael. I'm not sure what you mean.
Like provide implementation of add and not the implementation of remote, and provide them in different.
Sure. The only reason it's complaining here is because of the way we've set up the actual run command. But Johannes, if you comment out match tag and you just provide it with args, the second parameter to run is just the execute function, which takes the parsed arguments from whatever commands come in. So if you just like create a function here and just hover over the arguments that are passed to that function, you can see that the only reason it's complaining here is because of the DSL that I've set up. But you basically would just check which tag is being passed in this case. Because up above, we actually map the output of the commands to the DSL.
Got it. So basically, you're parsing the commands back to an AST structure that you can then further traverse. So there's two levels of indirections. Not only the representation of the CLI itself is done in an initial form, but also the arguments parsing and interpretation gives you back an AST of commands. Nice.
And if you scroll up, Johannes, you can see where I'm setting up, because again, it's left up to the user how they want to set up the AST. But if you scroll all the way up to the top here, you can see I set up the AST myself just using effect.ts, like the case.
But that's up to you. It's not prescribed. Yeah.
Correct. So you can do kind of whatever you want with whatever comes out of the CLI app. Is really only responsible for parsing the arguments and validating. And making sure that everything is set up the way that you've prescribed based on the options, commands, and the arguments that you've passed in. If that makes sense.
Can you briefly explain what command map does here?
Sure. So in this case, we are taking the output of, so when the command actually gets parsed, it's going to look at the options and the arguments that are given to it, and then expect you to do something with it. And so if we don't map it here, we would have to handle it in the run function if we wanted to do something with add.
I got it. And so this is where we're actually converting it into our nice like mini D cell.
Exactly.
Right.
So by mapping the output, because if you hover over modified and directory, you'll see I've
already seen this is okay, where we're getting it out of the, by default, this basically returns us a tuple of the options and arguments. And now we're basically just that we have a nicer life here. This is where we're mapping it over. And so now it intuitively makes sense. This is why it's mapping. Okay, that makes sense. Great.
And some of the other examples, I think in the word count example, even though the actual execution implementation is much more, the execute function is much more involved, you can see that the actual CLI app is just, there's no real DSL I'm building up for the actual commands that are passed in, because there's only one command for word count, right? It's more the arguments themselves that I'm building up like a DSL for. So it's very flexible you can basically do whatever you want to map the output of commands.
A parsing framework from a line of text, or like a segmented line, an array of
that makes sense. So here we didn't do the map before, hence we're getting the tuple as is before. And so here we're deconstructing it and shoving it right into the execute function. So this is structurally better suited for this case, whereas here it makes sense for us to lift this into like a little DSL.
And the nice thing about the options, if you go back to the word count example, you can kind of get an idea of what else we can do with options. So if you scroll up to the top, we're in this case, in this example, we're taking 4 different options for word count. You know,
I'm just want to figure out like option. Okay, option means here it is actually the option from.
yeah, they do the same
effect
thing in zio-cli, where option is the native option type in Scala. Same thing in effect.ts, but options is the the CLI version of options.
That's worthwhile being aware of. So options here comes from. Hold on, where does it come from? Okay, got it. That makes sense.
So in this case, the nice thing about the options that we're building up here is you can kind of decide how you want to build them up. So you can see under when I'm actually creating the options here, I'm using the struct DSL that effect.ts provides to allow people to, when the options are actually parsed and created, when they're spit out by the CLI app down at the bottom, if you hover over the options, you'll see that that tuple is, I mean, that object is essentially what's spit out, and then you can do whatever you want with it.
So let me quickly put this together in my head. So here we have these options. These options go into the command here, and let's compare this to what we had before. So here we had options modified flag. Okay, so here just basically I'll put this next to each other. So here we have a very simple case where we just say options.boolean, so just one thing. And here options.struct, that probably implies a whole bunch. Oh, well, here we're just
basically it's basically a way to group options for
that
command.
makes sense.
There's also a tupled version, I think. I have that built in already. But it's basically a way to say that your command takes multiple options and give it a little bit more of a structured output.
But this is purely here for the sake of the convenience of us down there getting a struct. But this doesn't imply anything for the kind of like CLI surface.
Nope, it's really just a way to group multiple options together. Like I said, I think I provide a struct.
Probably.
Got it.
Yeah.
Little point of feedback here. This seems to be not quite the same, so maybe that's worthwhile.
This goes back to I think the eternal argument that happens in Discord, which is the importing how things are imported. Michael's gonna turn off
as evident
Zoom.
Here. That's quite a bit. This could be like another this could be another session in its own, like just discussing different best practices there. I for myself, and I think I showed this briefly the last time, in every project that I'm working on, I typically have like somewhere where I'm building my own, where I'm re-exporting everything effect related. And the benefit there is I can here already bring in a bit of opinionation. And by just putting things here like this, I can, for example, ask for stream. I can go anywhere in the implementation and say, let's say I would need something with stream here for whatever reasons. I could say here s dot, and I can see I can use the auto import here, s edited, and now I can use the stream. And this all adds just nicely to one place. So that's kind of like my the best practice that I typically use. And I think Patrick and others have also landed on that. So
I think it kind of depends on how you like to visualize your types, right? Because like the only reason in that example that I'm doing things the way I am is because I'm trying to avoid the dot import stuff in the types to make it clear for people like what actually the type is. But if it makes it easier for people to read, I'm totally open to changing the example. It doesn't bother me.
I think like I think everyone in the effect community right now is like part of this experiment to see what are the merits and downsides of each approach, and maybe at some point we'll encourage some more consolidation. But I guess
we'll just wait for wait for Michael to rewrite TypeScript, and then we'll all be happy.
Progress. Don't worry.
That's the Christmas edition. All right.
Well, that's the Christmas edition. Nice.
All right. So in the interest of time, let's actually start applying this. So I feel like I have a bit of an intuition now. And so what I would like to do actually is let me do like a little hello world. So I just gonna export here a similar run function where I'm intending to do basically the same as here.
Why are you starting the thing as an async function when you're doing the effect time?
We're gonna get there. I just want to gradually move this over. We're gonna get there, Michael. Okay, so now let me import this. So, all right, git app here. Yeah, we're gonna git app. All right. Match tag. Oh, match tag. I don't have that in my effect re-exporting thing. Let me see, where does this come from? Core utils. Just here. No.
You really don't even need it. We could do a switch if you don't want to export it.
Oh yeah, that's true. We don't need it here necessarily. So yeah, let's see. Switch tag.
And if you're not going to be creating DSL, you don't even have to switch on anything. We can just use the raw options and arguments depending.
Oh yeah, that's true. So yeah, let's keep things simple here for now. So what is R?
I think the simplest example I have, if you wanted the simplest one, is the grep example, which I think doesn't do anything with any of the arguments. It just prints them out.
Let's see. I think the run main I need no matter what though. So well, this is back to Michael's point. I'm not gonna I'll use this later. For now, I just gonna use t run promise, and
pretty much punching me on the face at every line of code you write.
I'm very happy to do
function
so.
And any
it's a pleasure, Michael. Okay, so CLI app. This is the grand moment where we actually gonna import it, I guess. So we have here effect CLI. Wait.
/ something probably.
Maybe, yes. Okay, so this would be CLI app. Yeah, this is always like discover, like not many packages make like already, like if the effect ecosystem relies very heavily on submodules, but it's like almost the polar opposite for the typical the typical Node ecosystem, JavaScript ecosystem, where submodules are rarely used. So yeah, I have to get used to that as a discovery mechanism. So I guess we just import that as CLI app and can run this. And so we just now got to do let's do this as hello world app. So, and here we gotta now do the CLI app make. CLI app make. So I'm kind of going the reverse order. Instead of seeing the building blocks and then eventually going into our entry point, I'm now like going from the entry point and seeing what do I have to do. So we see it like once down, once up. So like you mentioned here, we got nice discoverability, name. I guess here would go content layer. Not sure what this exactly would be used for. Oh no, this would be just like a description, basically. Content
Yeah,
layer
you can do whatever you want with it, exactly.
Okay. Version, whatever autopilot, copilot is suggesting here.
By the way, who do I have to bother to get Copilot?
That's a good question. You can ping me later and I can see whether I can help with that. So now we have the abstraction of a command. Let's see how we create a command. Command, I remember, just was like a different import. So, okay, here we're now saying command. That's right. Command. Let's just say here we have the command. We, for now, just have one command. Make? No.
Create, probably.
It's actually this is again maybe an inconsistency in the API, but I may end up changing this to make just to be consistent with other things.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, so here, what if I want that to be the entry point? Would I need to give it a name?
Yeah, so you would give it, so if we're using, content layer as your example, the entry point could be content layer. If we're doing hello world, you can do hello world, but I would say put content layer in here. And then options and arguments are actually optional. So if you wanted to just run the basic CLI app.
Let's see.
You might want to return the promise given you're running.
So
the reason you're getting void here is because you're not giving it any options or arguments, the command. It's basically looking at the command you provided and trying to figure out what the type is. So you can basically you can essentially do a succeed with and print something, because it does expect an effect as the execution function.
As a return?
Yeah, so it is expecting an effect here.
Succeed with console log hello. Look at this Copilot going off on its own. All right. So
as Michael pointed, you may want to return the piped function as well.
Here.
You might not want to get in an async function.
I think I need, like I gotta put Michael a bit more through his suffering, and then we're gonna do this properly. So let me do the following. Let me just, this building. Okay, this is building. I'll just say here exports effect, and I just override this, at least for now, just that we get to something that works. And yeah, let's see. When we now run this, what happens?
Moment of truth.
Oof. Okay. Of course. Cannot find module effect TS node stream. Let's see what I have even effect TS node. I thought I had it. Where does this come from? Peer depend. Oh, I indeed did not have effect node as a dependency.
Yeah, it requires all three: effect node, printer, and CLI, because we use streams internally.
You don't have it here actually. So
I think I might have it at the top level, which is probably a problem. Okay.
Not even here.
Something to fix.
At least one thing that might have ended up being useful for you here as feedback.
It's okay. I'm keeping a list of things that we find.
All right. So let's add this. Okay, cool. So
is it still using the old stream implementation?
at the moment. I haven't
There we
converted it
go.
over.
Hello world. Nice. Okay.
Now you
Wonderful.
get a few hidden pre-built commands out of the box. I think the one that
Okay.
you might want to try is --help.
Oof, wow. Look at this. Some ASCII art here out of the box.
Yeah, so one of the things I didn't mention because I wanted it to be a surprise was I built for zio-cli has a very similar not similar implementation, but a similar feature where they have banners incorporated into their framework. But I built a custom Figlet font parser for Effect.ts CLI, which is huge, and I probably want to pull it out into its own, like either like package within the library or a separate library entirely, because it's actually a very it's a big like subdirectory within the project and probably warrants its own
What does
project.
it
But
do in specific?
are you familiar with I forget the name of the Scala version of this? Scala Figlet. I ported it over from Figlet 4S. That's the Scala package that I ported this over from. If you guys are curious and want to take a look at it. But really the only thing it exposes.
Okay, got it.
Yeah. The only thing it exposes through Effect.ts CLI is the ability to, it basically takes what the command name, your parent command name, and makes it into ASCII art for you.
Nice.
But probably warrants its own either package within CLI or project. I don't know. Haven't talked to you about it yet, Michael.
Oh, most likely want to have a separate project because it's quite big, but I also see usage for like many other places.
Yeah, I'll contact you at some point this week about it, but it's pretty. The port is not 100% in parity, but it's close. And so the help text actually changes based on the commands, the options, and things like that that you pass in. So if you had subcommands, you would see a section with all your subcommands there.
Wow. All
so
right.
if
Let's
you wanted,
dig into that right away.
Sure.
I want to, like, in the meanwhile, Michael hasn't even noticed. I've removed I freedom of a suffering, and I no longer do t run promise, but I use the node runtime run main here. So
So maybe you stop complaining when you get an error without traces asking me where
let's see.
the errors come from.
That's actually what I wanted to provoke now. So let's do a couple of different errors here. So
just throw in some places.
So this is my way to like confuse the TypeScript type system to allow to not eradicate this code path here. So let's look at this. Copilot already knows what I want. So let's run this. Okay, well,
you are in the help. You're not really on.
Yeah, you have to run the, yep.
Okay, so let's see. So unchecked error, that makes sense.
But I guess run doesn't have a trace.
Probably not yet. That's another thing I may end up syncing with you at some point, Michael, on is how I can incorporate traces into the CLI app, because at the moment I've disabled tracing everywhere, but I need to figure out how to enable it, and I haven't dug into it enough. So I probably want to sync with you on that.
Right. Yeah. Traces are actually really important for Contentlayer. Mostly for myself. Like there are some parts that are not fully baked, and if a user runs into them, if I don't have like proper traces, I'm kind of lost. Typically, undefined is not a function. It's not super helpful to get to the bottom of something. So traces are a godsend there. Okay, but I still want to now also say t fail new error. And this should
return that.
gotta return it. Let's see what happens. Okay, so it is now a checked error. Still, traces would be nice, but like you said, that's guess that's
actually it's strange that there is no trace even for, it looks like traces is disabled at all, because there should be at least a trace pointing to the fail.
Oh, wait a second, but that might be my maybe that's my fault that I don't have traces here somewhere. Like I probably need this.
That might be it.
Let's see if it works, because if it works, that's one less feature I have to implement.
Let's see. So, okay, there we go.
Well, to get traces inside custom functions, the only thing you really have to do is the last argument of a function, you take it as _ trace and as an optional string.
Got it.
The compiler plugin fill in the trace, and then you have to like manually put it in one of the functions you wanna trace, usually the topmost.
However, Michael, this is pointing now to the this file and not.
But that is because you do the new error. Just throw a string. The trace you're looking at is the JavaScript one.
Ah, that's right. That's right. There we go. Okay, here we're in the source. That's right. Okay. Quickly diverging to the printer. I would really hope that your investments in the printer can also like flow back into the effect core as well. And I would really like to get some more colors in here in an environment where we can afford it. And I think there's generally also opportunities to enrich this even further. So might be also a good session for the future.
And more granular things.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
Why don't
Okay.
you try adding in a subcommand, and we can see how the help text will actually change. So the way you would basically need to create a subcommand, and then I can kind of walk you through how you would combine it with your application.
Let's actually do do some useless things, and let's have a subcommand, one that like throws like a checked error and one that throws an unchecked error.
Why do you want to throw things?
I just want to like see whether the unchecked error actually also now traces properly. So
if you simply throw, no. If you throw from the place you were throwing before, no, because the CLI app.run does not have a trace. But if you raise the error from an effect, so like a defect scenario in something you call within t.succeed with, then it's going to be traced in precisely the same way. But it would be helpful to add in the CLI part this propagation of the trace, because then it connects it back to the prior execution.
And Copilot strikes again. Wow.
Okay.
That is exactly what you need to do. You're providing a group of subcommands for your parent command. So a command can have multiple children. Yeah, exactly.
Thank you, AI.
Very scary.
A fun fact, a friend of mine from university is actually has been heavily working on the AI system behind this. So it's kind of, I've caught up with him over the summer. And
you know who I have to bother to get this.
It's two different teams actually at GitHub and OpenAI. Okay, let's see. So here, oh, nice. So now we get the subcommands.
And the interesting thing is, so we haven't really touched on this very much, but effect TS-CLI exposes an entire like help documentation DSL, which I'm not super happy with my implementation of it. I kind of want to change it. But the DSL that it exposes allows you to pass custom help documentation into commands and your CLI app. and I think options as well. So if you actually provided a help doc for your subcommands, they would show up there in your documentation as well.
Nice. So I want to now in here like branch through and through which command we're in. So how do I know in here whether we're in the main command, the subcommand, etc.?
Advise having some sort of AST in between. So just have an ADT of your two commands, because otherwise here you get it as a union of two strings probably.
So here it still looks like void. Does that make sense?
That may be because it doesn't necessarily switch on the command that's being passed into the run function. You're basically getting the output of your options and arguments. So you don't get the command back necessarily, which is something we could change in the future, maybe. But zio-cli does it the same way, where the stuff that comes out in the execute function is the result of parsing your options and your arguments. So that's why creating a little AST around your commands may be helpful.
Okay.
And you can just map to the specific AST.
But I guess this kind of behavior is sort of needed to have these hierarchical structures, because here, for example, you don't want to see the content layer command in any of. It's just parsing logic that you have like.
And the help docs will also update, like if you actually call help on your subcommand, the help documentation will update for your subcommand as well.
So I just want to this still doesn't make sense. I just want to get just a quick and dirty version of the mapping, and then we can move on to actually integrating it. So
here you can look for a constant string. Right?
So here would probably be all right if I just say unchecked.
You might want to have a const
pipe. There we go. Sometimes creepy. And pipe. All right. And now we should have this be attacked union. Interesting. That makes sense. So here we're basically getting the hierarchy preserved. Okay, since I was already like factoring this in here, so I can distinguish this as well. But that makes sense. So hold on. This means what about the case when it's just a content layer and not neither unchecked nor checked?
Well, it would be you would basically end up seeing a it really depends on what options you're providing to the parent command, right? So in this case, you're not providing any options, so the output filters that out. There's a conditional type in there that filters the output of that function out, since you're basically, there's no output to your function right now for that command.
You mean to this one particularly?
Yeah, so actually we could do a test, and you can just log out the output if you just call it with content layer and see what it shows. Because this may be like this may be a bug that I have to address. I'm not sure, but I would suggest just trying to log out the output of, and you're probably going to have to do a succeed with.
Well, if there is any condition in which you're calling this function with a different type from the one you've specified, it's a bug.
Right.
That's as clear as that.
Okay, let's. I don't want to get in trouble with Mike, so I do it and I could succeed with.
It's probably suspended.
Okay, wait, is this like an old version? So seems like we never hit that code path.
And I think that I forget, I have to go back to the internals and remember how zio-cli implemented, but I think if your command has subcommands, it expects you to be calling your command with the subcommands. Like there is no calling the parent command by itself. I have to go back to zio-cli and double check, but I'm pretty sure that's the behavior if I remember it.
But I think that's a legitimate case that you want to allow. So
no, I agree. It's definitely
but at least
something.
the type signature now is consistent. Wait, why is it now unknown? Is this a case for restarting the TS server? Let's see. Restarting. Yes, it was TS server restarted.
The best practice there is literally represent this thing as an ADT.
That makes perfect sense. I just wanted to see like whether this like minimal, quick and dirty way would already get us to the point. And so the way, and just to finish this off here, if I would basically now say if
let's wait for the second of the top.
Just annoying. What is going on with maybe the TypeScript compiler is having a cold or something? Hold on.
You could just destructure the tuple in the arguments.
That's what I'm gonna do now.
But it's a union of two tuples. It's not a tuple itself.
Right. Right. So you won't be able to destructure it.
Does maybe I'm using a stupid TypeScript version. Maybe this one is more stable. Let's see. This is a problem I've faced recently quite a bit, that like some more complex types at some point just become unknown. Okay, so this is but if it's two tuples, shouldn't this allow me to like as a union destructure right away?
Depends. TypeScript doesn't really unify, but it's possible.
Like this?
Right.
Yes.
Yeah, there.
Okay, so we're basically just interested in the second one. So, and here we're sub command. So switch.
Because you also have to keep in mind that the output of this execution function is the options and the arguments, right? So what that tuple you're getting is not really the command and the subcommand. It's supposed to be the options and the arguments. In this case, I think it's a legitimate, you brought up a legitimate issue that needs to be addressed with probably the way I'm typing this function. But in the way it's supposed to work is that you would basically be destructuring the options and the arguments in that tuple. And there's also the case where you would need to be handling multiple subcommands, and that's kind of how I do it in the Git example, where you create like a small AST to wrap the output of your commands, and that's kind of how you can switch on them.
Got it. So yeah, I don't want to spend much more time on that. Just wanted to run it once and see whether this does the trick.
But I've noted it down.
So this seems to be exhaustive. This is why it kills the other code path. So let's see what happens now. So now it should give me the help. Let's do a checked error. A checked error was not handled. And let's do unchecked. And an unchecked error was not handled. All right, great. So we built our first useless CLI. So, but that was helpful for me to better understand it. we're just a quick time check. We want to keep this on track, and like I think we have less than 20 minutes. So we could either now try to like start moving over a real command where we can dig a bit into the options and arguments. We could also use the remainder of the time for you, Max, to show something else that you'd like to show off. I think that's up to you.
I don't know, Michael. What would you prefer? Honestly, it's totally up to you.
I think we have a chance by porting one concrete command to do both. I'd suggest to start with just a single entry, so we don't have a full thing, but maybe construct the ADT, parse it to a decent structure.
Sure.
Right. So we would here.
Also, you've mentioned help texts. I'd like to see, for example, the addition of a help text and how it looks.
Yeah. Do we have an example here with help text?
Yeah, and all of the I think, is it the word count?
What does P stand for?
Help.
Paragraph. Paragraph. It's a similar AST that zio-cli exposes, but I'm not 100% happy with it because I think the semantics are a little difficult to understand, because there's also a text constructor, which basically the difference between text and paragraph is a paragraph actually has a line at the end of it, whereas text is just a single line. But I think that this DSL or AST can be this DSL can be improved quite a bit by potentially just ripping out the layer. There's basically a layer on top of the printing library, right, which wraps all of this help text. And the reason being is that the layer on top of it allows me to use the printing library to output either for the console, or you can actually output it in HTML as well. But I think I can achieve the same thing without the extra abstraction layer, just using a printer directly. Right. And that may be better for people to not have to learn a second DSL on top of printer, since I am planning on documenting printer at some point. So, and because, you know, the whole point of the pretty printing library is that it's just a way to describe the pretty printing output of text, but then your rendering output can be to any backend. So the terminal backend for printer is already built, which is what CLI is using internally.
Right, but you could like print something for the web console and like make use of the more rich rendering there.
Yep, it's incredibly flexible and supports annotations, which is basically what allows you to render to different types of backends. The annotations that you provide alongside of the different pieces of the DSL is what allows you to output to different backends. But that's kind of like maybe a little bit outside the scope of CLI.
Nice. No, that's awesome. Yeah, I think for my purposes at least, it's great to know that this is how you can use it, and you kind of like flexibly like add this in as you need it. The help messages in the current Contentlayer CLI are also not yet perfect. So I think if there's a way to provide some information, that's good. But yeah, I'm keen on like now just getting a first command here running. And so sorry?
Let's get this done.
Yeah, let's do that. I'm just trying to in my head trying to figure out like, okay, if we were to do the AST thing or not, what how much structure we need to put into it. I would almost lean towards like not doing an AST yet up until to the point where we actually need to switch over something and start with one command.
You end up with a union anyway. I think the minimum structure you need is just a case class named like the command you wanna input. For example, let's try to make the content layer build.
Yeah, I would for now, like to keep this like this here until we have like 2 cases where we actually need to switch over and then refactor it. And I think that goes nicely hand in hand with adding some options and arguments in the first as well.
Sure.
So I kind of like to do these. I don't have as much experience with these abstractions yet, so I would like to discover these abstractions as my need arises. If that makes sense.
Totally fine. So my recommendation would usually be for people, if you are porting over a CLI library, it's the way I've done it with this framework so far is one case class per command, essentially, because you can take the output that's coming out of that command and give it a structure that you can then switch on, or right. Because again, it's coming out as a union. It's much easier for the type system to handle the union if there's a discriminant, right? So,
but you know what? Actually, given that there is already quite a bit of structure, maybe already introducing a little ADT already makes sense. So I think the way how you did it is using the tags. That's what I'm also using quite a bit. So let's say here we have the builds. How did you call it? Just build. Okay. Extends.
Probably a class, not a const.
Tagged. Oh, that's true. Muscle memory. Build. Yeah. Copilot can't do that particular trick yet. I have to teach it the tagged trick. So we want the config path, which is a string, read only for good measure. And then we want the clear cache Boolean, and we want the verbose Boolean. So how do I think about expressing it here in terms of optional versus non-optional things?
It's kind of going to depend on how you so the way that you're exporting it or creating it here lends itself to probably like a struct, an options struct. And then as far as optional or not, you would wrap it in an option, because when you make a command or when you make an option optional in effect.ts CLI, it wraps it in an option. So you either get some or none.
Which is one of the most intuitive things to do.
Okay, so all of these are optional. So let's see. So here let's also create a constructor for it. Would I need to now manually carry all of this over? Is there a quicker way for me to, I mean, I can like,
you probably don't need to create a constructor necessarily, since you're already you're going to be passing an object into the build class anyways. So what I would suggest, now that you at least have a build command specified or build AST structure specified, is that you create the options for your build command.
So I guess here I would do something similar to this.
Mm-hmm.
Opts comes from
CLI/options.
Yep. So
again, I can probably improve the naming of stuff in the examples, but generally when I use options with CLI, I actually spell out options, because that's the name of the module as well. And that example, as you astutely pointed out, Johannes, is probably in need of a little bit of refactoring.
Okay, let me just copy this since I'm lazy. Okay. Options.
Yeah, there's all options.
This is yeah. So you don't really have to specify the type. I did it for the example because I wanted to like show what was being passed in each step, because it might not be intuitive for some.
That makes sense.
Um,
Right. So here we have, is there a string?
So in the CLI, you actually have the ability to specify a file. So options.file is will basically check for the existence of a file depending on what you specify as the second argument. So by default, so you would name it in this case. What is the name of your option in? It looks like the name is config.
Config, yeah.
So that's what you would name it. And then the second argument to this function is whether or not you want the file to exist, not exist, or be either, whether it exists or doesn't exist. And what the parser will do is it basically checks the path of that file and make sure.
And you could like combine options and saying this is called config or C, or having multiple.
Yes, there's aliases for options. There's actually a separate module called exists. Needs to be refactored. Again, I was following the structure
a little bit
of
heavy-handed here if I need to.
Yeah, I was following the structure of zio-cli when I was making the
Right.
but we probably could move this.
I guess the mind space that I'd be in for like using the CLI package is that I would just have like one import, I guess, and then like use it off that. I'm not sure whether you find like a hierarchical wrapping that allows for that. But so here exists dot, yes, absolutely.
So it's a class. It's a yeah, new.
Okay, that's a maybe there can be a shortcut for that.
Lots of potential for improvement.
Okay, I mean this is what this session is for, right? So
the
oh,
one
and
other,
also like flag and option.
Yeah.
It maybe.
So Michael had brought up a good point about, can you provide multiple names for an option the same way you are right there in the base command that you've specified, and you can. So I would suggest piping options.file to a call to options.alias. And then you can just alias it to C, which I think is what you have already. And then you can pipe again that whole thing to options.optional.
Yeah, that's what we need. Oh, I can't wait
For example, this thing with a fluent syntax would be beautiful.
Yes, I just wanted to point that out. I can't wait for that.
The only weird thing here is again a limitation of TypeScript versus Scala and the whole like implicit versus non-implicits. But when you actually show this option in the help text, you need to provide a way to show it. So in this case, it's expecting an instance of show, which for the non-FP people in the audience is a description of how to display something. And show is, if you, in this case, since it's just a string, Johannes, you could probably just import show.string from effects core.
Guess I have to teach my effect module that trick. Where does it come from?
It's in core and it's under the show module.
So guess I just.
This is my compromise to try to allow us to show stuff in the help text, but not having implicits.
So show string.
Yep, and there, it's just a constant.
String.
Yep. So with that, you've created an option that's named config with an alias of C, and it has a it's optional.
Missing parentheses, seems like. Yeah.
I think it's just. Well, I can't export here, obviously. So config path. We're running short on time, but it's like I think I'm in the right in the right place here. So I would know what to do. So broadly, I would like pass in here the options. That's the second thing, right?
Well, given most of the things are optional anyway, let's try just to pass in the.
So here I just want to see whether we structurally get this to work. So we would say new build.
Well, don't you have to have the options?
Config path. Okay, so here this config path is an option. This expects just a Boolean. So here I would now say, oh.
So you basically haven't created the options for clear cache or verbose yet, which is why you should be able to just pass that underscore into build.
That makes sense. One thing I would like to do though, since my build does expect an option. I was already one step ahead, since otherwise it would have had like a default value. Can we also
assign to clear cache instead of config path?
Yep. That makes sense. But can we also provide default values here in these options?
Sure, you can just pass them in as just for now. I would just pass them into the object, but you do have the ability. There is a combinator for providing default values. In this case, I would say clear cache. I would just do options.boolean and just it would be same exact thing. It would be a Boolean, and then you can name it. And it's going, the Boolean option defaults to false by default. So all you have to do here is just make it optional and then give it a show.boolean.
Right, and here I still would like to, oh no, I don't have an alias even.
And in this case, you technically don't even have to make Boolean options an option, because Boolean options by default will default to false. So if you wanted to, you could change clear cache and verbose in your build, in the AST that you've built with build. So you don't need, for Boolean, you don't actually have to default it to false. It does that automatically.
Right. Okay.
And a similar thing, like for the actual object you're building up for that build AST, if I was building this, I would probably take the option out of it and just let it either be true or false.
One second, I just want to quickly finish this out here. Okay.
Unless the default behavior you want is true.
Exactly. Yeah. The default behavior you want is false, right? Because if that flag exists, so there is a negatable Boolean, right? So you can actually, it's basically the flipped Boolean, but when you show the flag, it's true. If the flag is not there, it defaults to false. So you have it wrapped in an option right now, but you really don't need it.
How would I unwrap it?
You just can remove
the options so optional. No.
Yep. Exactly. Just change that whole line to just Boolean, and then remove the options.optional. Right, and then yep. Precisely.
All right, so what do we have here? So this doesn't make sense anymore.
This is no longer a tuple.
And you also need to change the command you're passing in, right? Because right now you're still passing in the command from before.
No.
Oh no, you have it specified. Never mind. I'm sorry.
So hold on. This is now build tuple. Okay. So I guess the only thing here, we don't really need this. So this is not wait a sec. This is not
This is
build?
now build.
Okay, great. So we don't need to switch over it yet. So we can just say build for now, at least. Later we can.
And you should just be able to invoke the same logic as you have in your build command. Just the top.
I guess almost, probably because I need to like provide some services, etc. And I don't think we have enough time for that today anymore. But
if you wanted to see it at least run, you could just log out the build itself and
yeah,
see.
let's finish up on that. So T succeed with, you know what? I have even a log build. Yeah.
Why is it complaining?
That is a very good question. Oh, because I'm missing the log service. That's what I guess I won't do that.
Yeah, there's actually one of the things you can pass into CLI app when you're constructing it is the implementation of console. Again, things that we can change in the future, but internally there's a console service in CLI app that just basically delegates to console log. But that
likely at some point in time we'll probably need to move to the core.
That's great. I intentionally checked for that to see how you handle this. So now this should tell me about like build exists.
I need to get Johannes to like beta test everything that I do.
Wonderful. So here we have none, clear path. So hold on. The last thing I want to check though, like let's spend these extra 30 seconds.
Right, with minus
actually do me one favor, Johannes. Do a build with a help.
What? 1 second. I just want to check this whether. Okay, we have this, but now I want to see what happens now. There we go. Wow. That exists. Yes. Nice. Okay.
And
so
it does default to exists. Yes, I think. So it again, it just decreases boilerplate. But you see, if you specify the help for build, it'll actually show you the subcommand help as well.
Yeah. I mean, this is like the first time a CLI a CLI like framework is too much, but like a CLI helper system feels like just right. It's like a set of Lego blocks that I can choose from. And then when I chose these, like it gives me stuff that I would have otherwise needed to do myself. So that is great. I mean, I think the session has also like provided you a bunch of feedback on like what to improve, etc. But this feels really awesome. So I guess this is not quite in a position yet where I'll merge it. But I guess in a couple of weeks or whatever the pace is, I'm very keen on ripping this out in favor of this. This is great.
Yeah, hopefully in short order I'll have completions working as well. Right, I have a branch where I have a very basic implementation of completions, but I actually want to wrap that in a AST as well, so that I have more information when I'm constructing completions.
This is awesome. So yeah, just that for everyone who doesn't quite follow what Max means with this, like for a lot of CLIs, you have autocomplete. Like you hit tab here and you see everything you can do with Yarn. So this basically, but with this, instead of like seeing the files, we'd get autocompletion for our subcommands and options, etc., including help text, I'd assume.
For ZSH you would, and for Fish, I think they have help text. I don't think Bash natively supports it.
Right. But. Yeah. I remember you mentioning that it's for ZSH and Bash, but please be merciful to the fishlings like me.
It's coming. It's coming.
Awesome.
It's just.
It looks really, really nice. Yeah.
Thank you guys.
Max, this was super fun. Really impressed with what you've come up with so far with Effect CLI. So thanks so much for taking the time and showing us what you've been working on.
Thank you very much, guys. Really appreciate it.
Thank you very much, guys.
Awesome. Thanks so
The
much
next
for
time.
everyone's
Cheers.
time.
Bye bye.
Maybe see you in 2 weeks.